I started getting viciously attacked, like Soros level attacked. I get into the car with Stacy and I said, "You got to take me to the hospital, babe. I'm not going to be able to walk." And I'm literally hanging on her. And in LA Times and Governor Newsom's attacking me. It's on Twitter. It was a silver coin in a plastic case. She says you have to throw that away. It has sorcery and witchcraft attached to it. That's why you're...
If you could share one message to parents, students, and teachers, what would it be?
From the devil's side to the Lordside, Pastor Anthony's journey, all that podcast life.
Welcome to the Lordside. My name is Anthony Albizu. I went from the devil being my master to becoming a pastor, from sinner to shepherd, from the pits of sin to the pulpits in the church, from the devil's side to the Lord's side. And today we have the honor of hosting a guest who has been at the heart of some of the most important and controversial conversations about education and community values in recent years. Dr. Joseph Komrosky. He's one of the current board members of the Temecula Valley School Board District, a role he has held not once, but twice after a truly remarkable journey. Dr. Komrosky was first elected to the school board in November 2022, where he quickly became a leader in advocating for policies rooted in traditional and conservative values. Under his leadership, the board implemented measures that sparked national attention, including banning of critical race theory and a parental notification policy requiring schools to inform parents of significant changes in their child's gender identity. These decisions were met with both strong support and intense opposition, bringing local education into the national spotlight. His journey wasn't without challenges, though. After an initial recall effort, Dr. Komrosky was removed from office in June 2024 following a narrow vote. However, showing resilience and a deep commitment to his community, he ran for re-election later that year and reclaimed his seat by a razor-thin margin. His return to the school board restored a conservative majority and has once again placed him in the middle of pivotal debates about the future of education in Temecula. Dr. Komrosky's story is one of perseverance, leadership, and navigating the complexities of serving a diverse and dynamic community. Listen, whether you agree with his policies or not, there's no denying the impact he has made. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Joseph Komrosky to the podcast as we dive into his journey, his vision for education, and the lessons he's learned along the way. But before we get into it, make sure to like, subscribe, check out the description box below for links to follow us on Instagram and TikTok. And without further ado, let's get it. All right. Well, how about let's just get right into the questions? Yeah. So let's start a little bit with your background. Can you tell a little bit about your upbringing? What led you to pursue a career in public service? And
Yes. Well, I was raised an Army brat. I was born a German citizen. Me and my mom came over as German immigrants. My dad and her weren't married at the time. Long story short, my dad was in the Army. My stepdad was in the Air Force. And then I was in the Army. So I've lived all over. And I would say I'll get into this. It'll take a few minutes to unpack, but why I ran for public service, in the political landscape, it wasn't something I was planning on doing at all.
Really?
And now I'm speaking to the Christian more specifically, because somebody might ask, well, how do you know God chose you for this? And that's a really big question that I have for other people.
It's a big statement.
It is. And some people don't know, and I'll tell them how they can know. But for me, I almost died jumping out of planes as a Ranger. Half my chute didn't open. We'll start there.
Whoa. Yeah, please start there.
It was pretty wild. And that's a whole other story in itself. But let's just say,
where were you at?
I was in Yakima, Washington. It was a training mission. We were supposed to work. Well, that night we were supposed to meet with we call them SF, Green Berets, and then possibly Delta. We were supposed to jump in, hike up a mountain, and then meet with them. And we all jumped in a windstorm. Half my chute opened. I thought I was going to die.
What in the world?
Basically, once I got my chute back open, then I had to let a rucksack go because we always carry a lot of weight. I probably had 150, possibly 200 pounds on me. Plus on the side of me, I have an M203, which is a grenade launcher with an M16. It's like in one weapon.
Yeah.
So by the time I lower my rucksack, and you're supposed to do this so you don't break your legs, I probably had 2 seconds to hit the ground by the time, because like it was caught. I just felt like I'm being attacked in the air here, man. Nothing's working right, but we trained for this. So I hit the ground. I thought I broke my back. It was like I could barely move.
So you deployed something like 2 seconds before you hit the ground?
I deployed my okay. So my chute finally opens. Then I'm like, I have to get my rucksack lowered from my feet. It's in the middle of your legs.
Okay.
And it lowers about 6 to 10 feet below you. So it hits first, then you hit.
Oh, so it kind of breaks your fall a little bit. Oh, okay.
Well,
but that was only 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Wow.
And you don't want to land with that, because if it's in between your legs, you're landing with a lot of weight. And so I land. I thought my back was broken. I'm in a windstorm, like 25 knot ground winds. And I'm sitting there, and the first thing you're supposed to do is pop your riser to deflate your chute. Well, I didn't, because I was in pain, and we're trained to do that. And I didn't, and I was, just in shock. So the chute reinflates, and it starts dragging me across the ground by my neck, because the 550 cord, the stuff that's attached to your risers, all those cords, those are called 550 cords or paracords. It's dragging me up by my neck, and we're talking within seconds, I was being strangled. I was like, I'm going to die. That's it.
So the wind was literally...
It was 25 ground knot winds is a lot of wind. So the chute reinflates, my body's in the middle, and I got like a 150 to 200 pound rucksack on the other end. So picture like these, I don't know, these NASCARs when they pop their chute and it just stops.
Yeah. I know exactly
that's
what
my
you're talking
body,
about.
and the chute stopping me from moving where it's trying to, but it's wrapped around my neck.
No way.
So it's dragging me across the ground.
So that happened after you made impact to the ground?
Yeah, within seconds.
Wow.
We're talking 3 seconds, maybe 4. And I'm trying to get my bayonet out, couldn't get it out. I dug into my pocket. I had a little tiny buck knife, opened it up, and I started cutting everywhere. And I was like flailing. And I cut the 550 cord, the chute deflated, and I was sitting there like I was about to die. So that happened. Long story short, I became a disabled veteran. And even after that,
how old were you right there?
19.
Wow, you were 19 years old when that happened?
And we were trained pretty hard to where even though I thought I broke my back, I packed up my chute, hiked up a mountain all night long, and met with my squad. I found out the next day that half my platoon didn't hike up the mountain because they got injured like me, and I almost died. But I was a brainwashed private thinking I can't stop. I have to complete the mission. That's how you're trained, right? So that's a snapshot of what it was like to be an Army Ranger. And people get injured all the time, whether it's in combat, whether it's in training. So
that already says so much of your resilience. That already says a lot. Okay.
Totally. So even to this day, I'll have back pain every once in a while. And I'll, if I'm moving boxes in the garage or doing something, that I should be doing as far as lifting properly, it just triggers me pretty quick. But going back, how I got involved, I get out of the military. I start studying. That's a long story, but I'm going to try to condense it.
Sure.
I was in college for 25 years. People are like, wait a minute, what? Like, did you sign a waiver? Did you flunk out? No.
So you have like 6 doctorates?
No, sort of, but not doctorates.
For 25 years?
Yeah, it's I go to Mount San Antonio College first few months out of the military, and I was asking my dad, what should I do, Dad, as far as the medical field? I thought, let me get a job to where I could make money, something practical. So I was looking into Mount Sac to be an X-ray tech, respiratory therapist, a nurse. And my dad helped me because he was a medic in Special Forces. He was a Green Beret. And so his whole entire career was all about the medical field. And he told me, well, if you're an X-ray tech, you'll get less sick than a respiratory therapy, less hands-on than a nurse.
True.
Patients in and out. I was like, all right. So I enrolled in the Mount Sac's X-ray program. That took 4 years because I did a liberal arts associates, then a associates of science in X-ray. After that, I went to Loma Linda University for nuclear medicine.
Really?
And that solidified a job in nuclear medicine for 20 years. That whole time, that I was doing that, and I did something called PET-CT. It's a very specialized nuclear medicine. It's where you inject people with radioactive sugar and you scan them for cancer. That was my
Really?
job.
How old were you at that point?
I want to say, 2001. I want to say 27 or 28. And I mean, I had, I was making really good money after about 5-6 years in college. But that wasn't enough. My dad's like, I wanted to go to get a master's degree. And I remember my dad going like, Joseph, like, you're making really good money. Why don't you just do nuclear medicine for the rest of your life? And I said, because that's not all I want. God's gifted me with other things, Dad, that I want to pursue. And my dad's just like,
So
oh
good.
my gosh. So I was in love with philosophy. And I discovered that when I was in the X-ray program. I took a philosophy class. Now, back at the time, I wasn't a born again Christian, but I believed in God, but I had no connection to Jesus Christ. Not like you would have John chapter 3:3-5. You have to be born again, the Spirit of God.
There was no relationship.
No, but I had knowledge of God. And so I remember thinking, I love philosophy because it's a deeper wisdom about reality. And I wanted to know more about reality. I was always the person that would ask why. So people don't care about the why question. That was always me.
No, they don't. Yeah.
So like even in X-ray, when we talk about subatomic quantum physics and how electrons, protons, neutrons, quarks, and all that work. And I was like, why does the electron spin around a nucleus at almost the speed of light, but it doesn't get sucked into a very dense center?
Like
and I would
a
ask
vortex or
questions like
something.
that. And the X-ray tech professors were like, well, some of that's beyond my pay grade. You might have to go to a higher level, like a master. And so that was me back then. But we'll go back to this, how I became born again, because I think that's something we might get into. But let's just say I went to seminary at, I finished my bachelor's degree at Biola, and it was organizational leadership. It was a management degree. And the reason I did that was to get me into the seminary, Talbot.
Talbot is really good.
Yeah. So I did a bold program, got my bachelor's of science in organizational leadership. Then I applied to Talbot, and they have like 6 or 7 degrees. One's divinity, where pastors get trained, New Testament, Old Testament, systematic theology. I did philosophy.
Interesting.
So I got accepted. That whole program took about 8 years because they didn't do anything online, and you had to take all your classes in person. A typical master's is about 30-something units. This is almost 70.
Wow.
So people are like, why so much school? Well, the master's itself is almost like a double master's. So you do all your theology in seminary, Old Testament, New Testament, hermeneutics, theology 1, 2, 3, 4, classes like that. Then you do all your philosophy, metaphysics, epistemology, ethics.
Yeah.
And this is important for the Christian to hear, because some of them write off philosophy like it's some evil thing. And I'm like, oh,
no,
gosh.
not at all.
What is the beginning of wisdom?
The fear of the
Lord.
Yeah.
And what is wisdom? Depends on the Attic Greek, which is a language that existed before Koine Greek, which was common Greek for the New Testament speakers. It's just love of wisdom. And I'm all, well, wait a minute. If love of wisdom is me thinking about reality more deeper, and the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord, well, to be a true philosopher, you got to worship God. So it's like, I'm in safe haven here. I went to Talbot to study under one person, J.P. Moreland. He's a tremendously awesome Christian philosopher. And the head researcher there was William Lane Craig. And if you don't know who these guys are, they are
both of them they're legends.
Yes,
both of them are legends.
They are. I would consider them not just Jedi Knights, but on the High Council of Jedi Knights. If you watch Star Wars, those two are sitting on the High Council.
I actually have probably my in the garage, my library over there. Oh, right there, On Guard.
Yeah.
William Lane Craig.
Yeah. Oh, he's got.
Yeah, and I have a couple of J.P. Moreland books as well.
Oh yeah. Well, J.P. Moreland ended up becoming my mentor.
Really?
Yeah. So when I got out of Talbot, what they want you to do is, if you're going in for philosophy and you go in for a PhD, they don't want you to go to a Christian college. They want you to go to a secular college so that you can be a change agent for Jesus Christ. Not necessarily that you have to, but I mean, some people go to Baylor, which is a Christian college. I ended up going to Claremont Graduate University in Claremont, secular, even liberal. And so I go there and I do my PhD in 7 years. And some people are thinking, man, that's a long time. That was actually one of the quickest PhDs in philosophy, and that's in the history of Claremont.
Interesting.
Usually 7 years is like very rare for people to complete. It's usually like somewhere like eight or nine. But that's why 25 years. 2 associates, a certificate in nuclear medicine, the bachelor's, a long master's, and then a PhD.
And the long master's was the one in philosophy in Biola.
At Talbot.
And that's what took forever.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And then you got the PhD, which took 7 years.
Okay. And the PhD is in
philosophy. So at Talbot.
And which you did it at Claremont?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now at Talbot, I would say
That's
philosophy, but then it gets into philosophical theology. And another reason it's important for Christians is when you think about the nature of God, or when you think about your, are you free or are you determined? And how does God relate to your being able to be free? What about time? Is time dynamic? Is it static? There's all these deeper questions. And when you get into this, it increases your worship to God.
Yeah. And actually, you know what? Just recently, I think I went up to Philosophy 303, if I remember correctly. I think that was the highest I went. But I just recently, maybe last month, I opened one of my old books from college. I went to Liberty.
Yeah.
And I wanted to go back into determinism versus libertarianism, right?
Yeah.
And it did bring an awe towards God.
Yeah.
It brought me closer to God. Like, wow, like God is beyond all of this.
Yeah.
Like, yes, there's I kind of held more of, I don't know what you think, but I held more of a compatibilist view, and I know there's some flaws with that, but that's just kind of what I came to the conclusion of, more of a compatibilist. And, but even with that, like, it's a beautiful thing to understand that God is beyond all of it. And that brought me closer to the Lord.
Yeah.
Super good.
Oh yeah. Well, I know about compatibilism. Greg Kokel, he runs Stand to Reason, and I remember financially supporting that ministry for a long time. I ended up rejecting compatibilism later on. I'm a Molinist. You're like, what's that? Louis Molina, he developed something called middle knowledge, and he tries to reconcile God's sovereignty over human freedom, and I think he does it in a beautiful way. Basically, long story short, we're not robots.
Yes.
We are completely free. So I go to Talbot. I'm in that world for a long time, and I love it. And so I go to Claremont and I do philosophy, and I ended up doing a dissertation in virtue ethics.
Really?
And I tried to do an environmental dissertation where you take a problem in reality. It could be water, air, whatever, and then you apply an ethical theory to it, like applied ethics. And I focused on virtue ethics because it deals with character more. And I did the problem of 5G. And at the time, that was all. 5G was 5G was a fairly new phenomenon, but you might say I did that.
Oh, I forgot. You were telling me you were telling me about this at church one day.
Yeah.
That's maybe at a different time we could talk about 5G.
Oh, I will, because
dude, I forgot about that.
God has weaved his silver thread throughout my entire life, from being disabled veteran, every step of the way, right up into school board. And I actually used my PhD dissertation in school board to develop a policy to ban 5G towers on our school properties, or future 5G towers. So
really?
Yeah, all of it's connected. And what I do for a living now is I'm a full-time logician, you might say. So not magician. I suck at doing magic tricks. My son's pretty good. I teach logic full-time. It's something God wanted me to do at Mount Sac, and I'm like, no. And I'm running 50 miles in the opposite direction. Oh, I'm not teaching logic. And God's like, because I took a symbolic logic class at Talbot, and it was hard, really hard. And so years later, I complete my PhD. I go back to Mount Sac where I started. I teach adjunct there. One of my professors there, who was my professor at the time, he's still there, and he's not saved, so I always pray for him. Awesome guy. But he gets me a job there. They eventually hire me on. And I ended up teaching logic, and I was really good at it. And it was one of those things, God's like, I knew you'd be good at it. but I was scared of it. And he's like, yeah, you're part robot.
So,
Well, that's what I do. I'm good at making arguments, and that comes in handy because when we get to school board, 2 Corinthians 10:4, we're supposed to demolish arguments. They're strongholds. And so like,
take every single thought captive
in arguments. Yes. So all that education lands on this. I'm done with my PhD, and my wife has a joke. She's like, please God, don't let Joseph do anything more. Like it's already been years and all that. Because I would joke around, when I'm done with my PhD, I think I want to go to law school. She's like, oh my gosh, no. So we're just joking around. I just want to relax, frisbee golf, surf, smoke meat. I'm a smoker in my backyard. I love doing that. Oak, hickory, cherry. And I go to a Bible study, and it's the type where, you're ultra busy and people are like, oh, you're too busy for the Lord. Oh my gosh. All right. So I'm in a Bible study, it's one of those things. And Dustin, he was a bassist at the time for the church.
Oh, okay.
Probably know him.
Oh, big beard.
Yeah.
He moved.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
We did a Bible study in his house for a year. This is post-COVID lockdowns. Evan, Nathan, Dustin, there's a bunch of us in there, Damien. And most of them were 10 years younger than me, just as a landscape. And I remember going in there and just a normal Bible study, we're going through Joshua. And I started getting deeper in some of the questions. And I wasn't leading it, Dustin was. And they were, half the time I was like, whoa. So I would bring up determinism, compatibilism, Molinism, or the creeds of Christianity. And they'd be like, whoa. Half of them were like, what's a creed? I'm like, uh-oh. I'm like, the Apostles' Creed, the Nicene Creed, the Athanasian, the Chalcedonian.
You got to know
blank
this
stares. And they were like, and I was like, oh. So after about a year, most of them said, Joseph, you should teach apologetics at the church. You're really good at this stuff. Because I told them I used to teach it at another church in Aliso Viejo. And I was like, all right, man. I don't know if I want to do that. I don't know if I have time. Again, it's like, oh, you don't have time for the Lord. All right, they're all in prayer for me. That's when I started meeting you, because I was going to the church for years.
Yeah.
But I applied. They didn't have a ministry. And I sat down with Pastor Dave Cope, who leads the ministries, and Clark. And I told him, I'd like to do this. I need a room. I am a professor. I don't even need a PowerPoint or anything like that. I just need a space. And, if you guys would allow that. So they told me to fill out all the applications, do all this. Well, at the time, there was a lot of pre-COVID ministries that had not gotten passed. So there was a backlog. And so I was now in the chain of backlogged ministries. And I thought, well, you guys told me to fill out the paperwork. I thought I was going to be able to do this. And then it turns out no. And I was frustrated. I was like, oh. So I was like, all right, fine. And this is getting back to, how do you know that God called you? Well, I fasted and prayed for 3 days. Wow. I don't normally like fasting.
No.
And I did for 3 days. And the
So
question I
good.
said is, God, if you don't want me to do this ministry right now, what do you want me to do?
Hey, can I pause you real quick?
Yeah.
You just hold that thought real quick. When you fasted, what days were there? Were there the weekend? Was it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday? Were you going about your day-to-day work?
Going about my day-to-day work. It might have been midweek. It might have been.
Okay, so it didn't matter.
No, didn't matter.
Yeah, because I want to do a fast, and I'm like, and I want to, you know what? I think I'm going to do it when it's easiest, Saturdays, Fridays, Saturday, But so you did it during the week.
Yeah, normal activity. Okay. And everybody does different fasts. Mine were no solid foods. I could have coffee, I could have tea with honey, and I could have Hall's cough drops. I know it's something to keep me busy. They had no sugar in them. The only thing I would have is honey. And you think about something like this, John the Baptist was eating wild honey and locusts. What is going on? Like, he's fasting on a different level. Jesus fasted for 4 days.
Well, there's something about you relinquishing fleshly appetites and desires for a period of time. Yeah. And it's something that your body is craving on a day-to-day. Yeah. And it's not necessarily wrong, right? It's not necessarily, but there's something special about you feeling hunger and saying no, and it causes you to rely on God.
Yeah.
Because I've had it, and I'm not gonna lie, I've had it where I'm fasting, and I'm just complaining. I'm those are like, oh, do this. Oh man. And you're constantly, and it's crazy how much you think about what you don't have.
Yes. When you start fasting, but I'll use the Star Wars analogy. As a Christian, if you want to, if you like Star Wars movies, I always did. I always like lightsabers.
Oh yeah, me too. I love.
Man, it's
I'm
awesome.
the type of person I will psychoanalyze movies.
Oh, totally. Well, if you want to be a Jedi Knight and use a lightsaber, you will never be able to do it as a Christian unless you fast and prayer. That's it.
Super good.
And then to go steps further, you realize it gets easier and easier the more you do it, because you realize when the disciples tried to cast out demons, they couldn't do it. And they're like, they just started getting whopped. You know, it depends if we're in, there's 2 gospels that talk about it. And Jesus, like, those kind of demons require prayer and fasting.
Yes.
Well, that's something I was doing during COVID lockdowns. I was praying against demonic strongholds all throughout the United States. And so long story short, we'll go back to when I was done fasting and praying for 3 days. And the question was, what do you want me to do? The day that the fast was over, Greg Langworthy calls me. He runs a Salt Light ministry.
Greg Langworthy, yeah.
Yep. And I was working with their ministry for a year. And I was like, okay. And Greg's like, you know, Joseph, we have an opening up at Huntington Beach on election integrity. You know, somebody canceled. Would you like to go? And I'm like, yes. Because of the fasting and praying.
Oh,
otherwise, I would have said, I'm not really into the election fraud. I'm kind of frustrated.
So
There's no justice. I'm not going to do it. But I said yes immediately because God, I'm open to what God wants to do.
Yeah.
So we go. There's an ex-Fox News speaker.
Real quick. So what prompted you to fast is because doors weren't really opening with the church as far as, okay. And then you're like, what am I going to do?
Yeah. God, what do you want me to do?
So then this whole opportunity to go to this election.
Oh yeah, it's going to get better.
Okay.
So I go with Greg, and you know, there's an ex-Fox News contributor, fancy. It's I think it's at the Hilton or some fancy hotel. People are drinking wine, high fancy food. The Claremont Institute, not Claremont College where I went, but a Claremont Institute where you get these bigwig Republican conservatives. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, nice night. We go home. I was like, all right, that's nothing significant. Then a couple days later, Greg goes, hey, Joseph, he calls me up and he goes, hey, I'm going to be going to a PAC, Political Action Committee. Somebody canceled. Would you like to go? And I'm like, what's a political action committee? And he's like, well, this is going to be related to people that, you know, Christians that want to run for school board and city and this and that. I'm like, okay. Because again, anything that comes through, it could be through Greg or anybody. I'm open. What does God want me to do? So
and plus you're in the academia world and you're sure.
And I'm like, all right, let's go. So I walk in. And this is where I first meet Tim Thompson and John Andrews. They have this IA family pack. And some people, even Christians, have demonized him, and shame on them. And I'll get into the why.
He's the pastor for 412. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and I walk into this house. There's over 100 people there, and I see.
Wait, did you say many Christians have demonized him?
Some,
really?
Yeah, in our community.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I thought it was.
I've heard behind the scenes. You know, he's too extreme, this and that. I'm like, well.
Oh, yeah. I see what you're talking about. I actually just saw a video. Not to go down the rabbit of a person talking about the new trend of like they call them the bully pastors, where they focus on like a topic that's very like political or very extreme. Yeah. And they just talk about it all the time. And maybe that's what you're talking about. Like they just talk about those kind of pastors.
What kind of balance do you have as a pastor?
Yeah.
Yes. And then we can get into the Pastor Jackson. Yeah. Because Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills.
Yeah.
Well, I go there and I walk into the house and there's like 15 billboards and they have city council and school board for Menifee, Murrieta, Lake Elsinore, and Temecula. Highly organized. They have 12 openings. And I was like, whoa. And people get up and speak. And it basically said, we want Christian conservatives to run for these positions. And, you know, if you feel called, fill out this form, or if you want to donate money, or if you want to pray. So I'm listening and they're talking about stories of CRT and liberal teachers sexualizing the youth and things like that. I'm like, oh, And my ears are perking up now
Yeah.
because I'm a professor.
Yeah.
And I haven't heard about any of this happening at K through 12, but I already know at my level, CRT and all that. Oh, that's full on infiltrated. I mean, I teach at a liberal university, Mount SAC. And at the time, Cal State San Marcos. I'm still an adjunct professor there as well. And I realized, oh yeah, these are completely liberal. So I'm listening to stories and I'm like, wow. So like teachers coming out to their kids on how they're gay and the kids are second graders, or stories of CRT where it's anti-white, kind of wokeism stuff. And even, well, what's that word mean? And so I'm listening to this, and you have ex-senators in the room and you have ex-mayors. And I was like, wow, this is highly organized. I was impressed. So I raised my hand and I said, hey, if I was interested in running for school board, what's the time commitment? These are just real easy questions. And right then and there, a lady in the back of the room goes, I'll vote for you. And a lot of people in the crowd just started going, yeah. And then it was.
Wait, so you just simply asked a question. People were just saying, I'll vote for you.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it.
Yeah. And here's what happened though. You would think that, let me backtrack a little. You would think that when I go to seminary at Talbot and I'm talking about philosophical theology, increasing worship to God, you would think that I hear voices from God all the time. No.
No, yeah.
I'm one of those guys, almost like a knucklehead. Like God's got to literally open the clouds, Joseph, and say something to me. And so that was another reason I prayed and fasted. I wanted to clear. And the way I do it is I say, God, I want you to tell me what you want me to do, so that even if I was as dumb as a monkey, I could hear you. I would know it's you. That's kind of my prayer when I pray and fast. And in that moment, when I'm listening to these stories, I heard God, not an audible voice, but I knew it was him. He says, I want you to protect my children.
Wow.
I almost cried because it was an Esther moment for such a time as this. I knew.
Wow.
He was inviting me to co-labor with him. I could have said no and walked away. Unless it was a Saul on the road to Damascus where he's like, no, I'm going to make you do this, like force the will on you. But in that moment, I said, absolutely. Like I knew maybe this was.
Yeah, let's protect the kids.
Yes.
Yes.
And I was like, wow.
Wow.
And he asked me, and I was like, I was so humbled. So after the meeting's over, all these people swarm me. John Andrews, he's like, look, we got somebody running in your area. But he goes, holy crap, you're an Army Ranger. You got a PhD, you teach logic, this and that. Oh my gosh. So this is the funny part. John Andrews, full-on Christian patriot. He lives in Idaho now, but at that time he goes, okay, well, this is just one thing. When you run and you campaign, you got to raise about $20,000. And I looked at him and I go,
I'm out.
I go, that ain't happening. I go, let me run that by my wife. And keep in mind, my wife's like, just one more thing this guy's going to do.
Do you take credit cards?
Yeah. And I was laughing. I'm like, okay, well, that probably ain't happening. So I meet all them. I'm impressed. I go home and I said, hey, Stacy, I went to this thing last night and, I'm thinking about running for school board. What do you think? And I see the look in her eyes and she was just like, oh my gosh. And she didn't say anything. And it was like, well, that probably isn't happening. Well, later on that day, I call her dad. And her dad, he comes to all these school board meetings with my wife. He's ex-Navy. I won't hold that against him because I love Army. But he's a hardcore patriot. And I was like, and me and him talk a lot about, Islam, political events, our country. We can get into deep conversations like that. And I love that. And I said, hey, Leon, I thought about running for school board. What do you think? And he goes, do it. He goes, I've always wanted to get into school board, local, elections, this and that. And I was like, sweet. So a couple hours later, I talked to my wife in the backyard. Hey, babe, I talked to your dad. He's all on board with school board. And within an hour, she's like, all right, let's do it. So God weaves all this stuff. And I'm like, this is not going to happen. 20 grand, all that. That was nothing for God. And he got my wife on board because I'm not doing this unless she's on board with me. And that's what Christians have to realize in ministry. If you're married and your wife's not on board with what you're doing, chances are God doesn't want you to do it, or something about your character is not aligned for that moment in time, maybe later on in the future. So she's on board.
That's good.
So
that's a good application because you're called to be one with your wife.
Yeah.
And when you're making a huge life decision that'll change your life like that, your wife has to be on board.
Oh, yeah. And you could sit there and watch your wife laugh and you're like, there's no way, God, this is going to happen. And God's laughing.
So pretty much, so She did to you what Sarah did to Abraham and just laughed. That's funny.
Totally. This is super important. And then now I'm going to come back to where I originally started. If a Christian says, I'm doing this, I would say, how do you know that God called you to that? How do you know? Not believe, but know. Because it could have been somebody picked up the phone and said, bro, I think you should run. I think God called me to this. No. It could be that, somebody picks up the phone and tells you to run, but that to me is a very superficial reason.
Mm-hmm.
When you fast and pray and God lines up your life into something, and it could have been something that your whole entire life was gearing up for, you just didn't see it coming. But it's like when the dust settles after fasting and praying and God lines us up, it's important because I prayed, what do you want me to do? And make it as crystal clear to me as if I'm dumb as a monkey. Well, he did. And he says, I want you to protect my children. So that way, when I go on to school board and I do what I do, which I don't know how I'm going to get attacked, I never quit because I know God called me to it.
That is
I know he's behind me. And I've seen other people drop out or not get elected
because of the attacks.
Or
wow.
they get in the ring of spiritual warfare, and we'll get into this, and it's tremendous, especially when you protect children. It's way more tremendous than running for Senate and Congress. People might not be able to grapple with that one. You start protecting kids, you get the upper echelons of demonic activity, if not Satan himself, attacking you. That's where you're really getting attacked.
Wow.
And that's what I know.
And you don't want to talk about that?
Oh,
that's crazy. I think we should talk about that.
Yeah, big time.
There's some people in the upper edge. Wow, that is wild.
And you don't quit because of the fasting and praying. No, he called you to it.
Exactly. And I want to talk about that really quick before. That's what kept you going.
Yeah. The whole time.
And that makes sense. You think of all the attacks that you've been through, right? All the verbal attacks, the people really defaming you.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I can only imagine the spiritual warfare. And maybe we'll get into this too later. You went through crazy. Did you get paralyzed or paralysis last year? I'm like, what is happening to this man? That's why I would text like, man, I'm praying for you, bro. I'm praying for you.
I'm in a hospital. I can't really move. Yeah, I'll get into.
You were
some
paralyzed. So all that to say is that in my mind, I'm going to be transparent. Like I would have doubted.
Yeah.
Like, all right, God, maybe you're telling me to stop here. But you knew it was God.
Yeah.
And I kind of think of how Moses, there's no doubt that God called Moses to do that work, to deliver his people out of bondage from Egypt.
Yeah.
And he himself was like, God, not me, call somebody else. He felt,
can't speak.
He felt inadequate, right?
Yeah.
So he did what God called him to do by the power and might of God.
Yeah.
And he was attacked. People were complaining against him. They had revolts against him. That's a true sign of leadership, biblical leadership. And this is what I mean. A leader has to know they're called by God, because that is the only way to endure such attacks. Mm-hmm. And Moses understood. He didn't take it personal. He knew that the attacks, that the people that are coming at him, he didn't take it personal because he knew, hey, that's between you and God.
Yeah.
I'm just simply doing what God's calling me to do.
Yeah.
Which is why Moses kept going. And that reminds me kind of your story. And now it makes so much sense because I had all these questions like, what kept you going?
Yeah.
You were convinced.
From the very beginning.
God said, I need you to protect my children.
Yeah.
Wow. Bro, that gives me chills.
And I didn't even know what school board was. I might have voted in past elections. I'm like, all right, something with, schools, political action. I didn't even know what any of that actually meant before I fasted and prayed. So I had you're like, yeah, I've always thought about No. There was never any of that. It was fasting and prayer. And God's like, I want you to do this. So, okay, I got to learn about political action committees and politics and blah, 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 school board.
You were convinced.
Now you want to get into the attacks?
Yes.
And Satan's like, are you really convinced?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Let's do that.
I'll give you the attacks all the way to the hospital bed. Now I'll go pretty quickly,
Sure.
but on some of them I'll expand because
Oh yeah, take your
it's
time.
it's
This
like
is heavy. This is heavy.
mhm.
This is heavy.
So in the beginning, we banned CRT first meeting, and this is what I tell people. This is at least how I think of it. Some people may disagree. If you're a conservative Christian, you don't wait to protect children because it'd be like this. If we think there's aspects of CRT or sexualizing the youth, let's wait 6 months to protect them. It wouldn't even make sense if I said that to somebody.
Yeah, for
People
sure.
are like, well, when you swear in the first night and you do this, you don't get to know the district staff, the union, this and that. And I say, why do I have to do that when I can protect the children now? And I quickly realized as a board member, we have two powers of the branch of government. There's executive, judicial, and legislative. A board member has the judicial and legislative. It means we can create policies and we can make sure they're being implemented, in terms of justice throughout the district. The executive function, that belongs to the superintendent who we hire. He's like the CEO of all these schools. And so if I have the ability to make a policy and we can get votes on that, we can protect the children now, I'm doing it right now. A conservative doesn't wait. They do the right thing because they're driven by character, which is the pursuit of virtue. In fact, I want to read to you something
Sure.
just real quickly. Philippians.
I'll go there as well.
Meditate on these things. Philippians
4:8. Yeah.
Finally, brethren, whatever these things are true, whatever things are noble, whatever these things are just, whatever these things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of good report, if there is any virtue, I did virtue ethics in my dissertation, deals with character, and if there is anything praiseworthy, meditate on these things. So for me, if you have a virtuous character, it means God has aligned your character in terms of the habits that you possess your whole life. And if he wants you ready for a ministry, two things. Your character has to be ready for it because there'll be certain power he gives you influence over. And if your character's not ready for it, you'll crack and you'll drop out of your ministry.
Oh yeah.
And the other one is that God will not call you to ministry unless you've been broken first. What does that mean, broken?
Super
Unless
good.
you've been humbled. He will not call the prideful and arrogant. They will get resisted and they will turn some of the flock away from the ministry. We can go down those paths, but I feel like it's like this. Think about like when Peter said, hey, Jesus, how many times? I'm just going to act like Peter. I'm hanging out with Jesus, bro. How many times do I have to forgive that knucklehead? 7? Jesus is like, no. 7 times 7. And it's this number. What
70
Jesus
times
was
7.
really getting at was as many times as it takes, you will never stop forgiving. In fact, you're going to forgive so much, it becomes second nature. It's going to solidify. These behaviors will get solidified in your character to where it's like.
Can you make sure just speak into the mic?
Yeah. It's like behaviors getting solidified, like habits over time, so much that you do it without even thinking. It becomes second nature. To where as Christians, we forgive all the time. Instead of, well, I don't know if I want to forgive that person. You might need a little bit more character work before God puts you in that ministry. Who knows? Think of it like a second baseman. He can catch the ball, tap the base, throw it to first without even realizing he's tapping second. It just happens like that.
It's muscle memory, yeah.
Yes. And so that's just one virtue of forgiveness. Then there's self-control. I mean, we could think of the fruits of the Spirit with Galatians. Some of those habits God molds in you over time. Some are supernatural. He just gives them to you. It's like, who knows what you're going to get with God? So for me, I believe that in my character formation, at least for me, I'm bold. I have an Elijah spirit. And I don't wait unless it's more prudent or diplomatic to wait. I don't wait to protect kids. So that's kind of where we're at. Then
but all that's to say, yeah, the task, that's the part we want to talk about.
First night, I probably, the auditorium at Temecula High School, I was talking 400 or 500 people. There's at least 100 students in there. And they have these banners that say bigot, homophobe, racist. It was insane.
Towards you?
Towards us, me, Danny, and Jen. And the teachers at Temecula Valley High School, a lot of them were giving the students extra credit to do that to us as new school board members. And so we came into a
wait. Hold. The teachers were giving them
some
extra.
of the teachers.
What?
Yes.
What's the name of the assignment?
Well, I don't know, but we saw.
Are you sure that's what they were doing?
Yes, I'm positive. Jen, on
That is
campus, there was
crazy.
there were billboards being put up, or there were notices of school board meetings coming. They want to ban CRT because it was agendized to the whole public 3 days in advance. It was agendized either Wednesday or Thursday, and then the meetings on Tuesday. So that means teachers have 4 or 5 days to react. And
this is your first meeting.
First meeting.
So hold on, let's walk this through.
Yeah.
They knew what. How did they get to that point? Even before that first meeting, how did they already know you, or how did that happen? How did it get down to the students? How did this, like, did they know that, oh, you know what, it's a majority conservative board? Is that what it was?
Yeah. On the campaign trail, let's just say the community of Temecula knew that me, Danny, and Jen had conservative values. Well, what are those?
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
We want law, order, justice. We don't want, and let me define wokeism, because people use this word all the time, and some people fling it out there and they don't really know what they're talking about. I'll define it as a hypersensitivity to LGBTQAI plus sexual expression, gender identity, or racism, or social justice issues. Any one of those three, there's a hypersensitivity to promote that. I want a hypersensitivity on common sense, not wokeism. I just want back to the basics education, reading, writing, math, science. Those are what you need to graduate, and flourish. This extra stuff, the wokeism stuff, we're against that. So then you might say some of the liberals in Temecula knew that. Then you got the moderates who could go like either way, depending on what. We had a lot of the moderates and the conservatives saying, this is what we want in Temecula. We are a majority conservative city. We've been this way for a long time. So you might say the culture in the community of Temecula was such that everybody knew who we were.
Oh, and that explains when you were campaigning, they figured you guys out. Okay.
Yes. And so we come in, we get attacked. Long story short, I'll just run down some of the attacks. One was that, I get the union president attacking, harassing my wife and father-in-law at a meeting. Well, we didn't give teachers the raise on that particular meeting. We stalled it for things that I can't really discuss, but that happened in closed session. But I was never that I wanted to decline teachers or raises. I'm a member of a teachers union at my college, and I love majority of the teachers doing good things. There might be a few teachers that are woke, but surprisingly, even some of them are actually good teachers on the actual material they teach. It's just that they're bringing in this extra stuff we don't need. So long story short, love the teachers, want them to get raises. But the president union was sitting there trolling my wife and father-in-law during a meeting.
When you say trolling, they were...
You'd have to ask my wife the exact language, but he's basically pacing up next to where they were sitting, and majority of the room that night didn't have a lot of conservative patriots in there. There's only a few, but let's just say my wife and father-in-law knew that he was trying to harass them.
I see. Okay.
They just knew, they felt it. So that was one thing. And I'm like, all right. Another thing, we didn't want to pass TCI curriculum, social sciences curriculum or social studies, because it had the mention of Gay Liberation Front, which had ties to NAMBLA, which had ties to possible pedophilia associations. So we're like, well, let's pull that out.
Is that the Harvey Milk situation? And
then in the 4th grade, there was a module that mentioned Harvey Milk, a biography, and Mr. Gonzalez, Danny, said, there's a mention of a pedophile. And I said, really? What was the name? And he goes, Harvey Milk. And I'm like, oh, why are we mentioning a pedophile in our 4th grade? And that's when all hell broke loose at the state level.
So that was crazy. That was crazy. Now, here's my question on that. This was a book that wasn't, from my understanding, please correct me, and this is more of a question.
Yeah.
This was a book that was a part of a collection or a grouping of books that is available to children at what age?
The biographies?
Yeah.
Depends. That biography of Harvey Milk was available to them at 4th grade.
All the way to high school.
All the way to high school. But no. It was K through 5. So basically 1st through 5th grade was the social studies curriculum. They would have access to that. And then they go to a middle school. They might have a different social studies program. This was just 1st through 5th.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So,
and all we were saying is remove the bibliography. We don't have them access to it. Why are you introducing that? Again, wokeism. There's a hypersensitivity.
What's the name of the book?
Social Studies Alive was the curriculum.
So I don't want to understand, what did Harvey Milk have to do?
Oh, inside the curriculum, there's a digitized platform, and it had over 100 biographies, all kinds. Just one of them, Danny caught this. I didn't catch it, and it had Harvey Milk attached to 4th grade. There's a lot of other biographies that weren't pushing any wokeism or anything like that. We just thought, all right, this is unnecessary. But here's the thing. It didn't even mean that a teacher was going to use it. It was optional. But as school board members who were like, we want to protect the innocence of children, let's pull that out.
So when you say it's optional, it was optional for the students to pick at any time, or it was optional for the teachers
for the teachers to use.
Okay. So with that being said, how often was it being used?
We don't know because we hadn't been approved yet.
Oh,
yes,
okay. So this was a book that wasn't in the system yet.
Yeah, it was a curriculum.
And it was, so who chooses which books to be presented to be voted on or whatnot?
So that comes through the form of the superintendent, the teachers union, teachers. They might have different piloting programs. For example, right now, as we speak, we're piloting elementary school math called Bridges program. Who decides that? I'm actually trying to dig into that more.
Oh,
because we're trying to figure out, do we adopt this? And then there's years to come. What kind of pedagogy, meaning what's the process used in teaching math? Are we deviating from how we used to teach math? All those questions are what community members like you ask. Like, well, why this curriculum? I'll go back to that in a second. You'll really get a 100-foot view and be like, oh, well, there's special interest groups behind some of this.
So you never took the book away?
No, just the biography.
So why was it such a big deal then?
I'll tell you. The reason it was a big deal, the reason we didn't approve the TCI curriculum didn't have to do with the Gay Liberation Front or the Harvey Milk. No. Those were like minimal things. We said, this is what Danny said, you'll love this, Education Code 60002. You have to look it up. It talks about when you approve curriculum that the parents have involvement in it and other members of the community. Well, at that time with TCI,
what is that code again?
Education Code, California Education Code 60002. In fact, you can read it, or I'll read it.
Yeah, I want to do it.
It's very simple, and this is something so important for the public to know. There's a special website that I use. It's called Find Law. There it is. It's got a little orange emblem. Each district board shall provide for.
Is this the code?
Okay. This is the code. Each district board shall provide for substantial teacher involvement in the selection of the instructional materials and shall promote the involvement of parents and other members of the community in the selection of the instructional materials.
Wow.
Mr. Gonzalez and Mrs. Wiersma, they worked in subcommittee for months and they knew about this education code. And when Danny mentioned that, I was like, heck yeah, didn't know. And so it was really about this. Less than 45 parents were involved in that process. And it was very flimsy involvement with the district to the parents.
Involved to what extreme?
Meaning questionnaires. What do you think?
Okay.
Were you involved in the pilot, this and that? Because teachers are always involved, but not enough parents were involved. At least Danny and Jen didn't think so. So we said, we're going to pull the whole curriculum from now. We want more parental involvement. But when I said all hell broke loose, what was really happening is all throughout the state, LA Times, Governor Newsom attacking me personally on Twitter.
Which we'll talk more about that.
Yeah, they made it about Harvey Milk.
Oh.
But during the meeting, it was all about the California Education Code and the parental involvements. Why? Me, Danny, and Jen ran on parental rights. Everyone knew that. Well, now we're putting it to the test. And now we're using California Education Code. We're not saying, hey, let me look at my Bible or let me talk to my friend. No. We have this code that's law that can help us. So we pulled the curriculum And in LA Times and Governor Newsom's attacking me, it's on Twitter. It got 1 million something views. I started getting viciously attacked, like Soros level attacks. Oh man, we're gonna go there.
I don't mean to laugh at you.
Yeah,
there's attack, there's spiritual attack, and there's George Soros attack.
Yes. The average Christian can understand it like this. We all hear about Ephesians 6. We battle not against flesh and blood, but principalities and wickedness in heavenly places. We all hear about that. But they're not really thinking about Daniel 10. Go back to Daniel 10.
Yes, the Prince
How long
of Persia.
did Daniel fast? 21 days.
Oh, okay, yeah.
He got resisted. Well, sorry, the angel Gabriel, we believe it's the angel Gabriel that came. He was telling Daniel, basically in our vernacular, hey, bro, we got your prayer, man, on day 1.
Yeah, but we can't.
But I was being resisted, man, bro, by this real powerful principality of Persia. But Michael the archangel, he resisted him, bro, and now I'm here with you. That's kind of what happens.
That is crazy.
So principalities are what we're dealing with, not just ordinary demons.
So you were literally going up against a principality.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. If not Satan himself, because when the children of God protect the children of God, especially like the literal children, because we're all children of God, that's when you're encroaching upon Satan's territory.
So can we kind of talk more about that?
Yeah.
When you talk about a principality came against you?
Yeah.
What did that look like? Who were they? Like, who are these people specifically?
It's a certain flavor of malicious attack. Let me give you one.
Did that involve Gavin Newsom?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
It involved Gavin Newsom, the teachers of my community college, my academic senate president, rate my professor. Let me paint a picture. So this gets published in LA Times. Gavin Newsom attacks me personally, says that I'm an ignorant, whatever. This isn't Texas and whatever. He's making fun of me on Twitter. I could pull it up. And I'm sitting there thinking, you're making it about Harvey Milk. We attacked your cult. They worship Harvey Milk. Some of the liberals that are into the hypersensitivity of LGBTQI+, they worship Harvey Milk. But the thing that I say is this is a 34-year-old adult having sexual relationships with a 14, 15, 16-year-old child. So to me, that's pedophilia. The FBI didn't make a distinction between what level of pedophilia, because people got into it and they said, well, that's preterism, instead of pedophilia. And I'm like, the FBI says you're a pedophile at 18 and below if you want to sexualize children.
So you're kind of explaining the story behind him, right?
Yeah.
Well, actually, I think a lot of people don't understand the story behind him.
He served in the Navy, which awesome. He's a veteran. Great. Awesome. They actually named a carrier after him. They named it the Harvey Milk.
Really?
I believe it's a carrier. Yeah. And my father-in-law, Leon, he wasn't happy about that. A lot of people aren't happy about that. It's like, look, the guy's a cult figure when it comes to LGBTQIA+. So they're naming a carrier after him. I think he was the mayor of San Francisco. He was running for a political office. He eventually got assassinated. That's horrible. And I don't think he got assassinated because he was gay. I think he got assassinated by somebody who was running against him. Something happened, right? And I'm like,
what was he running for?
Man, I almost want to say it was supervisor or mayor. I have to go back. I have it all written out.
So that's why they're very supportive of him, because they're
political office.
They kind of use him as a martyr type.
Yeah.
I see.
And on that part, I'm with Harvey Milk. I'm like, look, the guy got assassinated. He served in our military. Awesome. Those are all praiseworthy. But that extra component about his lifestyle, they're magnifying that above all this other stuff. And I'm like, all right.
Yeah, you got to take the whole picture.
You got to take the whole picture. So why is a fourth grader knowing about them? Knowing about him? Well, if it's not about his military service or his political accolades or whatever, and it's more specifically that he was gay, it's like, we don't want the kids knowing about that yet. Maybe in middle school and high school. And that's even another war. When do you expose them to that? Well, we have something called the FAIR Act. You have to actually tell the students about LGBT. It's actually law. But when do you do it? We don't want it at elementary.
Yeah.
So we can decide that for middle school, high school. No problem at all. And we were fine with it. So what happened is after Governor Newsom tweeted, LA Times put out articles, press enterprise, we're talking all throughout the state coming after us. I had rate my professor at about a 5.0. It's as high as you can go. I never check it. My students love me, and they're always honest about me. And I've never asked for a good review. I just asked them to be honest about me in my class. After that happened, in 2 months' time, I had over 300 people that were never in my class rip me on Rate My Professor, saying I'm a homophobe, I'm a bigot, I'm a racist, I'm a on and on and on. And my other
Wow.
professor there, he was removing them for me. My professor, going back when I was a student in 1994, and he teaches there now with me full time, he was trying to protect me. And guess what? He's not even conservative. He goes, Joseph, this is insane. This is
Really?
super malicious. I had people calling, giving death threats, calling my dean of humanities, on and on and on. Well, this is where I'm going with Daniel 10. The academic senate president read the LA Times. They were slamming me. He sends out an email to the entire community college, all the leadership, all the deans of the departments. And he basically said that I was a homophobe. I would never take Komrosky's class, especially if I was gay, just ripping me apart. And he never CC'd me on the email. He's ripping me apart behind the scenes. I have no idea what's going on.
Wow.
My office mate goes, hey, are you all right, bro? And I'm like, yeah, dude, everything's great. He's like, are you sure? I'm like, yeah, dude. And a couple days later, he asked me again, is everything all right? I'm like, yeah. And he goes, do you know what's happening behind the scenes? I'm all, no. He shows me the email and I'm like, oh my gosh, the entire campus knows who I am now. And now there's a negative slant. It was a
And this is
character
at
assassination.
San Marcos.
Is at Mount Sac where I'm
where you're
tenured.
teaching. Okay.
Yeah. And so basically, I read this, and what was happening is a couple days later, there was graduation ceremony, which I love. I love getting in my robes, going down, seeing all my students. What was happening is the union of the college, they were all handing out LGBT ribbons because of what happened with that story. And they were going to take a stand as a college, and they love the LGBTQIA community. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's all about me. That story in LA Times. And so I had a sheriff at Mount Sac call me and says, hey, just to let you know that the security level has been heightened to level 3 at the campus, where there could be possible, violence or whatever. And I was like, why is he calling me? It's because of that story in the LA Times.
The sheriff?
Yeah, of
Wow.
Mount Sac, or head of security. I think he was a sheriff. And so I, for the first time ever, I didn't go to my own graduation with the students because I did not want to go into the just wokeism times 50,000 coming against me for something I never even did. I don't hate gays. I don't hate transgenders. They're all made in the image of God. It might be a behavioral sin that I don't approve of, but I still love them.
Amen.
I don't condemn them.
Amen.
I don't hate them. They're
I
all in
agree.
my class.
Yeah.
Any one of those students, I've had transgender, bisexual, gay, heterosexual in my class. If you were to all ask them, what do you think of the professor? They're like, this guy's the coolest guy in the world. I never talk about their sexual preferences. But the story going through LA Times and the Governor Newsom is no, he hates gays. So the academic senate guy who wrote all this, I lodged an investigation against him, and I said, you should resign and apologize because you used Mount Sac server email, you blast me.
Wow.
And he was telling me to go in front
So
of the
how did
board.
you, if it was all done behind your back, how did you find out?
My office mate sent me an email that everybody got behind the scenes that I wasn't on. He had
That's
read
so
it.
sad.
Well,
That's
the
very
guy,
malicious.
his name was Roger Willis. He said I should go in front of the board of trustees at Mount Sac and explain myself, this and that. It was like the worst character assassination. So I wrote him a letter back, and one of my lawyer buddies helped me. And it basically said, everything I've done is political, has nothing to do with Mount Sac. I was elected to do this. Long story short, the investigation never went anywhere. And this is the Daniel 10. This is where we're going. He gets promoted to assistant dean of humanities above me.
That same guy.
Now I have to report to him and the dean of humanities. And I'm thinking, not only did he not apologize and did he not resign from the position, now he's above me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is how malicious that little attack was. And I remember thinking, I might have a lawsuit here. If this guy ever says anything negative about me, about my evaluations, it's discrimination. I've been targeted. Long story short, a couple months later, he doesn't get the role. He goes back to being a professor. They hire somebody else. That was just one attack. Then you get the Rate My Professor. I'll give you another one, and I'll kind of end before I go into the hospital. I know we're going over time, but if you got the time.
No, yes, I got the time, yeah.
The attack on my dissertation, 4 or 5 months into school board, It might have been even before the TCI curriculum. My wife comes home. She goes, they're accusing you about plagiarizing your dissertation. I go, what? Oh my gosh, man. And she goes, well, do you really want to know more about it? I'm like, no, I don't really want to know. She's like, okay. Another month goes by. My university, Claremont, reaches out to me and says, hey, you've been charged with plagiarism of your
No
dissertation.
way. Are you serious?
Dead serious. So we have to
After
review
how many
this.
years?
I defended in 2021. This was 2023.
Okay.
So a couple.
So a couple years. Okay.
And they said, and I was like, all right, I want to know who lodged this complaint. They're like, oh, well, it doesn't matter who lodged it. We have to take all this, even though it's anonymous, we have to take it seriously. We have to investigate this and that. And I'm like, this spiritual warfare was so thick. What they wanted to do is the liberal people that were behind this on Reddit, it was anonymous. They wanted to strip me of my doctoral dissertation and my PhD. What that would have meant is maybe legal fees and just the ultimate shaming. And so then people are like, well, bro, you do serve God. He could take everything away and this and that. I'm like, yeah, okay. My PhD is not an idol. I get it, bro. But if he takes it, okay. But I mean, talk about a crisis of identity.
Yeah, that's like, huge.
My identity's in Christ, but like, I don't think God would want me to do this for all these years and then have Satan rob me of it and laugh at me.
Yeah.
But I'm going through that. It was very stressful. We find out somebody on Reddit made this post and there was like 7 charges. And some of the things were so ridiculous. I promise you, I had over 290 footnotes in my dissertation. That means I'm literally saying, this is not mine. That's not mine. I'm getting this from this. I have 30 something pages of bibliography. If anybody read my dissertation, like, yeah, this guy's not plagiarizing. He is footnoting everything. The guy that did the anonymous post would show you my dissertation. He's like, oh yeah, Joseph footnotes on this sentence, but he doesn't quote the actual part of the sentence where I'm like, dude, I'm footnoting the sentence. I'm letting you know it's not mine. That's how ridiculous this was.
Wow.
Not only that, I had a guy, I said he was really good with IT and he knew somebody that worked in military intelligence in the government, whatever. And I said, can you find out who this is, who this anonymous post was? It's going to blow you away. There was a guy, he had a PhD in molecular biology at Stanford. I forget his name, but I have it. He lives in Temecula. He's the one that did the post against me. So another PhDer. I was like, okay, he's got a level of sophistication where I respect that. He's got a PhD. His wife was a member of the Chinese Communist Party.
No way.
Yes.
How did you figure that out?
Because the guy did a deep dive on the husband and the wife. He knew because of the Reddit posts and all that. He knew who the guy was. Then he looked at the guy's wife. So she was also a Chinese police officer.
No.
Either currently or at one time, but she was currently a member of the Chinese Communist Party. I'm like, wait a minute, what are the odds? So now I'm going back thinking Trump, China. What are the odds that China knows? So I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Daniel 10, principalities. Like, wow. They're coming after me bigly. Just like, long story short, the investigation happens. Did not plagiarize my dissertation, but I had to go through that. Right after that happened, I used it to ban future 5G towers. Here's why they came after me. And this is sad. I made my dissertation free online because it was related to 5G when I campaigned. Said, hey, I'm going to ban 5G if I can and reduce EMF exposure to kids. They don't need these. And we have 3 towers on our property, and I believe they're harmful. So I made it open to the whole world. The guy looked at my free dissertation and went after it. So
which guy?
The anonymous guy on Reddit.
Oh, the same guy.
Yeah.
With his wife being a Chinese.
Yeah. Now, that couple lived 1 mile away from Jeff Pack. What are the odds that Jeff Pack and them are friends? Jeff Pack is the head of the Progressive Liberal Platform Political Action Committee, Temecula 1 Pack.
Bro, that's
they hate us.
Crazy.
And so we're like, they live 1 mile away. What are the odds that they know each other? Well, of course they do. So
wow. And who did you hire to look into that?
I didn't even hire. I just said, hey, bro, let's just say, I won't disclose the name.
Okay.
But it was somebody that was helping me on the campaign trail that was very politically involved, way more than me. We're talking, they have a political action committee. And it wasn't, I'll just give you a hint, it wasn't Tim Thompson, nothing like that. It was some other person. And I was like grateful. God restored me. I had my PhD. I use it. But the greatest attack of all, I would say, is the hospital.
Really?
So I get recalled. There was a lot of confusion being run against me. Some of the liberals were posting out signs saying that they were for parental rights. And we were looking at the signs going, what? Dude, you guys hated us when we passed the parental notification policy. Now you're saying you're for parental rights? They were trying to confuse the community of Temecula to where the community of Temecula would think, oh, we got to get Joseph out of office because he's not for parental rights. Oh my gosh, dude, he helped pass it.
Yeah.
So there, who's the author of division and confusion?
Satan.
That's right. So that was the tactic used.
Yeah. So we're on to recall now, right?
Yeah.
So real quick, and I don't mean to cut you off because you're actually going in order without me even asking any questions. Good. How did it feel being recalled? Like that's honestly, like did it hurt? Did it hurt or?
No, because it's funny you ask that because during the recall, we were super aggressive. I had funding coming in like crazy. I wasn't asking for money. I'll just tell you this. I asked my treasurer later on in the campaign, we raised over $35,000. And he says, Joseph, I've done many school board candidates. I have never had anybody raise half what you've raised. And I'm like, it wasn't me, it was God. He was pouring in the resources. So we lit up the community. We had all these street rallies, campaign flyers, all this, and I had massive support. Then I got recalled. I would say deception, but also we found out that there was 200,000 ineligible voters in our Riverside voter rolls. So 200,000 ineligible voters, and we could never get the answer. Well, how many of those ineligible voters live in my area? Greg Langworthy, they tracked this. Our ROV Register of Voters in Riverside, they knew about these outdated voter rolls in November before we even got elected. They said, yeah, we're still going to use them. They used them for our election. They used them for my recall. They even used them for this last election, knowing that there's over 200,000 illegal voters.
Wow. But that's 2,000 legal voters for
200,000.
200,000 for the entire Riverside County.
Yeah. And I think now it's up to about 250,000. And you're like, are they illegal aliens? Are they dead?
Yeah. But here's my question. But there's only a small amount area that could vote for you. Because I couldn't vote for you. I'm right here, right next to Pechanga, right next to Great Oak.
Right.
Right.
You would have voted for John Cobb or Steve in this last election.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So we were wondering how many are in my trustee area. We don't know. And we're getting that information. Let's just say Mike Hestron, he's our district attorney, and Chad Bianco, they have all that information. We're trying to pressure them to have a lawsuit against the ROV. Like, hey, dude, you can't run elections with outdated voter rolls. What's going on? So long story short, one more tidbit. There was a nursing home in the last week of my election. There was over 200 votes that came from it. What we found out is over 9 people were over 90 years old. 2 of them were from a dementia ward that literally they can't remember. They have memory problems. They voted against me on the recall. We're like, how does somebody in a dementia ward vote? Somebody went in there and started pushing hard to get people to vote. We're like, holy crap. So it was just, you might want to say the enemy is very tactful on how they can try to get people out of office. Last thing, and this actually happened when I was school board president. This wasn't even during my recall. Me and my wife, we had a legal separation. Marriage is tough. Holy crap. I don't care if you're Christian, non-Christian.
Oh, yeah.
People get divorced all the time. We got legally separated. You might just say my wife was mad at me, hired a lawyer, this and that. That was in a court. The liberals found it and posted it online.
So that legal separation happened while you were president?
That happened like 2016.
Oh, so that was a while ago.
Totally.
But you guys are still together.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Happily married. The liberals get that posted online as if it's something new. And they're like, oh yeah, Joseph's abusive to his wife. He shouldn't be around kids. I'm like, me and my wife are like, you've got to be kidding me. They don't care what they have to do. Neither does Satan to get you out of office. They don't care if you're dead in a wheelchair. They don't care. Yeah. Out. I
was actually talking to your wife, and I feel like this situation brought you guys closer, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. She's a warrior, man.
Yeah. Oh yeah, she is.
She gets attacked. I tell her, babe, don't get triggered by some of these progressive liberals in the meeting. Don't respond, man. They're trying to bait you. Once they bait you, man, somebody else is going to have her camera aimed at your face,
Yeah.
recording you. They called my wife. Let me just give you a story. So I get recalled. We look back and we say, yeah, there were some shenanigans. Well, what do you do now? And the liberals are having their heyday, making fun of me. And I don't take it personal because God called me this. There were people of mine, Milana, her mom, and a few other people, they're having dreams like you're going to win the election before the recall happened. And we were all kind of dumbfounded. Well, why'd you get recalled? And I never doubted it. I said, no, he's not done with me, but he's allowing me to go through this process. Who knows why? It could be to put pressure on the ROV. Fleets of people at our church started going and visiting them on a weekly basis, putting pressure on them. I think God was wanting me to take a family vacation with my wife and kids for about 5 months. God's like, you did a good work. You just relax. You just relax. We got you. And that's what happened.
That's funny.
So here's two things. I'll go into the hospital attack, but before that, just give you something that happened to my wife. She's talking to a lady named Christine Massa. And Christine Massa hates me, Danny, Jen, she's one of the progressive liberals that just, is behind the scenes attacking us. My wife is talking to her one night. And my wife is like, you're ugly. And then my wife was trying to clarify.
She told your wife that?
No, my wife told her that.
Oh,
my wife was trying to clarify. She goes, I don't mean physically. I mean your character. Like, why are you doing this? So my wife's talking with her. I don't know the exact words, but she's talking to Christine Massa. And on the side, there's a student listening. And the students start piping up because I think the student knew Christine Massa for all these years, their personal friends or whatever.
Yeah.
And the student starts coming after my wife, like raising her voice. And my wife's like, could you lower your voice a little bit? That whole thing happened. And then the students started crying. This was the headlines within days. Dr. K's wife was yelling at a student. Students are no longer safe coming to the school board meetings.
No way.
Oh, yes way. And I'm like, I'm like, Stacy, man, you got beta. Like, what are you doing? And they're filming her. It was bad. Allison, the other board member that didn't win her election, she basically talked about my wife and the student crying and this and that. My wife is like, you're a liar. And it was just like, so what I tell people, if you're going to run for office, you have to realize that you're going to get attacked 24/7 and Satan's going to constantly try to bait you, your wife, your family. Don't take the bait. But God has our personalities. We're all different. And my wife, all she's doing is defending her husband. So she was not going to have any of this lying. So we would hear stuff like Joseph's abusive. He's a cocaine addict. He broke his wife's jaw. His wife's an unhinged alcoholic coming at board meetings. Here's the reality. I don't do coke. I've never hit my wife. Stacy's been sober for 20 years. All of this stuff is lies. The liberal progressives, they don't care if they have to lie at all. You can get this with Trump and his, administration, not getting elected. Lying doesn't matter at all. So when people are like, but how, and they're getting frustrated and they're wondering why that, people get attacks and lies. And I say, those kind of demons are removed by prayer and fasting. You want that lightsaber? You want justice? Get on your knees, start fasting and praying. That's what you got to do behind the scenes. So that's my 100-foot view of looking at a political life for a Christian is depending on the severity of the attack. You have to be willing to pray more than you ever have and get into the word and let God fight the battles for you. You don't even have to open up your mouth sometimes. You can go in and vote and leave the board meeting. The more you say, the more will be weaponized against you.
Yeah, super good, super good. Well, we're almost done.
Okay. Do you want the hospital one?
Yeah. No. I have plenty of time. I'm more worried for you.
No. Okay. I got a football game to watch tonight, which I'm not really into as much, but I'm a huge Vikings fan. Okay. They're playing. Man, I'm off till mid-February on Mount Sac.
Well, I really want to talk about the time, after you got recalled, which is crazy, and before you got voted in again.
Okay.
You went through an incredibly difficult situation. You faced extreme pain. You were partially paralyzed?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Can you share more about what happened? I mean, because the doctors didn't even know what happened, right? But
No.
what were the symptoms? Like what happened?
So
Did this happen right after the recall?
Yeah, after the recall, every summer, my wife's best friend, they used to live with us in San Diego. They moved to Texas. And this is kind of funny, but they're the only couple that prayed for my recall to go through.
Really?
That I didn't mind because they wanted us to move to Texas. They're like, we pray you get recalled so you can move to Texas.
That's funny.
Like, I love you guys, man, but really? So we go visit them. And it's kind of funny. During that trip, we go visiting Danny, or I did. Stacy stayed with, her friend and all that. I went up to Danny, hung out for all day, and we bonded. And he's the board member that quit and went to Texas.
Okay.
So Danny knew I was going to run again. He was like, "Man, you're crazy." He goes, "You're a warrior, man." But and we could share our war stories because we're Christian brothers, and we'd laugh about it. So here's what happened. When I got back to Temecula, we were on a road trip. We drove. The day that I got back, I was going to go into the district office, raise my right hand, and swear because Lene, the superintendent or the secretary to the superintendent, it turns out you could go to the ROV and raise your right hand and swear before you do all your paperwork, or you could do it at the district office. So I went there.
So this was. I'm sorry, I lost track. Was this after the recall?
Yeah.
Okay. So what do you need to swear for?
Well, I'll tell you.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So this sets up the stage. Satan knows that I'm going to run again. And I have a peaceful vacation. I'm super happy, no stress at all. And I'm like, yeah, okay. I go back, and this is what happened within 4 days' time of getting back to Temecula. Day one, I'm in my yard doing very light labor, just watering my yard. I pull my Achilles tendon. I don't know it on that day, but just keep in mind, all I'm going to do is run again for the campaign, and I need to get to the RV, do my paperwork. That's what Satan knows I'm going to do. And here's the attacks. Day one, I pull my Achilles tendon. Day two, I get up, I can't walk on my left leg. I'm just like, holy, it's really bad. And I didn't even feel pain the day before. And on that second day, I have bronchitis. Can't stop coughing all day long. I'm like, dude, I'm sick. I can't walk. My wife's looking at me like, what's going on? Even with bronchitis, I go to the district, I raise my right hand, I swear in. I complete paperwork with her. She witnesses it, all that. Day three, I have difficulty urinating. And by the end of the day, I couldn't urinate on my own. Literally couldn't use the bathroom.
What in the world?
Yep, day three.
So Achilles.
Bronchitis. Couldn't urinate.
Okay.
On that day, before I knew I couldn't urinate, I contacted a few brothers and sisters in Christ that are very close with me. And I said, hey, I know that I'm going under tremendous spiritual warfare. I'm feeling it coming on because I know I'm going to start running again. Satan he wants to attack me. I said, please pray for me. You're not going to believe this. One of those prayer warriors said, did you receive a token recently? And I'm like, and in my mind, I'm like, and she said it within a minute of me saying, I need prayer, spiritual warfare. And I said, as a matter of fact, I never get gifts like that. And I go, yeah, I did.
Whoa.
I received this. And I took a picture of it. She goes, that's exactly what I saw in my vision.
Whoa.
It was a silver dollar. It was a silver coin in a plastic case. She says you have to throw that away. It has sorcery and witchcraft attacked to it. That's why
what in the world is happening? That's crazy.
And so I said, yeah, but the people who gave it to me, I won't say who they are. They're patriots. They love me. She goes, yeah, I'm not saying that they put this on there. All I'm saying is the coin has it on there. God's revealed it to me. You have to get rid of it. This person came to my house and said, I'm willing to bet my entire reputation on this, Joseph. I'm telling you right now, God's going to do something very tremendous in your life. You and your wife, you have to be holy. You have to, any possible sin in your life, let it go. She goes, with that coin, you have to throw it out now in the trash cans. And I did.
And that person didn't know you got a coin before that?
No.
Wow.
And I'm like, as a matter of fact. And I said, was it this? She goes, that's what I saw. And I'm just like, what? Now, backtrack months before, I'm at a prayer meeting with the McGees. They go to our church.
Oh, yeah. Rick McGee.
Yeah. And Darla.
Yeah, I love them. Yeah.
There was somebody in their prayer meeting. She goes, Joseph, there are witches, covens praying against you guys all the time. Like like sorcery, witchcraft, it's happening all the time. You guys just aren't aware of it. And I'm like, oh, I'm aware of it. But when she said that, it entered my mind. I'm like, there's hexes, curses all the time on God's people. So any legal right that you give to a demonic attack, whether you have emotional problems, anger problems on it, you're giving a demon a legal right to attack you. So anyways, this person goes, God's preparing you for something way bigger than, in her mind, than even school board. And so we don't know what that is yet. But so she doesn't know when she's at my doorstep that I would not be able to not use the bathroom later on that night. So she comes over, gives me, prays over me, this and that. Me and my wife are like, holy crap. So the end of that night, I can't use the bathroom. I go to the ER, Temecula Valley Hospital. They Foley cath me. As a grown man, when somebody sticks a catheter up your penis, you're like, okay, reality check.
Yeah.
That's when I'm like, all right, all these attacks in the past, the PhD one, that was pretty bad. The governor one, this is on a different level, man. I don't want to get capped. So I get capped. They're like, go see your urologist next day. And I said, okay. So I could use the bathroom. I could, turn on a little lever. The next day, I get out of bed and I couldn't walk.
No way.
My knees were wobbling. And keep in mind, for these past days up, like on day number 1, when I had to key as a tenant, I had like feverish kind of cold chills going on back and forth. And I was like, something's not right. I had electrical shocks under my ears. I was like, and by day 4, I told Stacy, by day 3, I said, Stacy, something's not right. Something's not right with me. I don't know what's going on. Day 4, when I couldn't walk, she realized, and in order to get me to use the bathroom, to literally walk to it, I had to hold on to her shoulders or I was going to fall on the ground. Wow. And keep in mind, you didn't know this, Anthony, but I played soccer with Eugene. I played clubs or adult soccer in age 40 and above and age 40. And I was in 2 league teams for years playing soccer, highly physically, stamina wise. I could run. Now I can't even walk. So, I get into the car with Stacy and I said, you got to take me to the hospital, babe. I'm not going to be able to walk. And I'm literally hanging on her. I get into the car and Stacy will tell you, she's like, she thinks I'm half robot, going back to that logic thing. She's like, I rarely ever see my husband cry. She goes, this is probably the second time I've ever seen him cry in his life. Wow. I was crying when I got in the car. I realized it's going down.
Really?
I'm being attacked so hard now. I don't know what's happening, but
that emotion, those tears, were they emotional or because of the physical pain?
Emotional.
Because you knew.
Oh, I knew I was being attacked. And I was like, God, I need help. Please help. It was.
Wow.
So I go to the hospital.
That's real.
Oh, it was. And I was like, I go to the hospital. I'm tough. I mean, I got some Army Ranger blood. I'm like, no. Even then, grown man crying. I go to the hospital. The head ER doctor, he does a spinal. He's adjusting me and he's doing all these maneuvers with my knee, legs. And I said, maybe it's my prostate gland, even though it was good like last year, I don't know, maybe something's happening to where I can't use. He goes, Joseph, I don't think it's your prostate. I think it's your spine. I think it's neurological. And I'm like, wow. Okay, really? So he does a spinal tap on me. Then I do 3 MRIs. And then the next day I do another 3 MRIs with contrast. And I got attacked inside the MRI. I never had claustrophobia. Now I do. It's like, wow. So he said, you have lesions in your C-spine and your T-spine, your cervical and thoracic. You have lesions and they're constricting your spinal cord and they're making it to where you can't use the bathroom and you can't walk.
What in the world?
I know. And I'm like, well, how do I have it?
What triggered it?
He, to this day, nobody knows why. So what they do is they admit me to the hospital. I see a neurologist. He's taking care of me. He gives me a massive regimen of steroids and immunoglobulin therapy, and it basically shrinks the lesions. I have him. I have neurology, and I have infectious disease. They're both talking to me, trying to figure out what happened. Blood test, cerebral spinal fluid test, neurology. He says, you don't have West Nile virus. You don't have valley fever. But the infectious disease doctor, it was really cool talking to him. He goes, the first night I saw him, he goes, explain where you were in the past month. And I'm like, we went to Texas and he goes, stop right there. He goes, really give me details. He said it could have been a tick or a chigger that bit me that made my autoimmune system attack itself. And I was like, oh my gosh, I was in Texas. And he goes, did you get bit by a tick? I'm like, I don't think so. but I know I did by a chigger, and it hurt.
A what?
A chigger.
What is that?
They can like bite your ankles and legs. You don't even see them, and they're like mosquitoes. But they itch.
How do you know you got bit by one?
Let's just say it's like getting bit by a mosquito, but it hurts worse over days.
Okay, so
and we just know that they have them there
in Texas.
Plus, when we went, it was that hurricane coming in, and it was super, super tropical. Like we knew, hey, chiggers are out in the yard. But then I told him I went surfing in the Gulf of Mexico, and he's like, here's what we know, Joseph. We've had a spike of people that have symptoms just like you. It's called transverse myelitis. It attacks multiple levels of the spine from people that got bit by ticks, chiggers, or even that dirty water in the Gulf of Mexico in Texas.
Wow.
And so
in Texas.
Yeah. He says, we don't know that that's what caused it.
Yeah.
But it made me feel a little bit better. I'm like, okay. He says, or it could be stress related. Now, me and my wife were
Keep
like,
speaking to the mic.
Yeah. He says, or it could be stress related. Me and my wife were like, well, we haven't done anything stressful in the past 2 years. Like, we're laughing.
Yeah.
Like, of course. So, long story short, I have prayer warriors, standing outside the hospital doing vigil light candles, praying like crazy. But here's the coolest thing in the world. The first night that I was in the hospital, I'm in ER. They had a spare room for me. You're only allowed 2 visitors at a time. At one time, we probably had 12 to 15 people in that little room. You might as well have had a disco ball in there. All Christians anointing me with oil, praying over me, and they would sneak in. It was like God's like, no, don't worry. We're going to get you into that room.
That's
and it was awesome. A lot of people were scared for me. I was never scared for myself at all. God had me in this bubble. Who knows? He might have had a legion of angels protecting me. I actually never had fear, but my wife and all these other people are like, oh, hey, Dr. K, maybe do you think it's, I don't know, maybe you want to take a break and maybe not run? Let me go back. Remember how I had to...
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. Well, I forgot to tell you this. When I entered the hospital, I wasn't done with my paperwork at the ROV. I raised my right hand, but I had to go to the ROV and finish filling it out. And I knew, I was like, well, Satan accomplishes mission. I can't leave the hospital. I literally physically can't get there. God comes along the side. He's like, I don't know. We got that covered. We found out that since I raised my right hand at the district, somebody else could turn in my paperwork at the ROV.
Oh, wow.
So I'm literally in there in ER, and my buddy Jason Craig, he comes there with all the paperwork. I'm filling it out. He fills it all out for me. I sign for it because I'm like, bro, I can barely move my hands, and I had to sign. So what you guys don't know is the first night in ER, I couldn't move my legs. I couldn't do this. I was like struggling to tap my fingers, and I would look at my big toe. I couldn't move it for like 30 seconds. We're talking very slow movement, the paralyzation part, because I didn't tell you it took me about a week to be able to start moving, to be able to start walking. Well, we just kind of laughed because my buddy was able to go to the ROV, fill out all the paperwork. And then my campaign manager, Milana, she's like, Dr. K, maybe you want to, take it easy. I'm like, no. Here's the campaign sign ID I want. And I was running my campaign from my bed. So why would I not quit? God never told me to, but I could have. He probably 100% would have granted it. But I told people, God never told me to quit. So again, why wouldn't you quit? You're in the hospital, bro. You got all this? Go back to the praying and fasting. And by the way, I prayed and fasted for a month, not necessarily food. I won't say exactly for what. It was something that was in my life. And I was like, God, please take it away from me. So for a whole month, I was doing that before I got attacked and went into the hospital. It was like another confirmation that God did not want me to quit. Keep on running.
Wow.
So now...
And it comes down to you knowing your calling. You knew God told you to go, keep going, and nothing was going to stop you. No spiritual attack, no nothing verbal, no malicious attack behind your back, discrediting you, taking away bits and pieces of your identity. And not only that, your physical health. You couldn't walk.
When I got out of the hospital, the neurologist, it's kind of funny. The neurologist's grandfather was the neurosurgeon for JFK when he was president. Real famous. Wow. Yeah. And so this guy knew his stuff, and I loved him. He goes, Joseph, you are making me look really good as a neurologist. The fact that I was walking within a week, When I left the hospital, I thought I was going to get all my normal functions pretty quickly. That's when the pain really set in. I just got to let you guys know this. When I got out of the hospital, I had a Foley cath hanging out of me for weeks. And I had burning bladder infections. I could barely walk. It was horrible. And then instead of taking a semester off of Mount Sac and doing it fully online, I go there in person and teach. And my other professors like what? Like, oh my gosh, if I were you, I would not be here. I did it to push myself to not get comfortable laying in bed all day. Then they pull out the Foley cath and I still can't use the bathroom on my own. So they put a parapubic line that comes out below my belly button. They're like, all right, you could start trying to go on your own, but if you can't, you have a backup line. I had infections with that, and it was painful as well.
Oh my goodness.
And I had neurological buzzings throughout my spine. I would get in my car, bend my head down, my body would shock. We're talking like this happened for a month and a half. This was really sucky stuff. All that's gone.
Wow.
I have a little bit of neuropathy on my feet. I'm able to use the bathroom on my own, but I had to go through that. And that was Satan's way of trying to humiliate me. And this is what I would tell the Christians. I knew that God would allow Satan to sift through me to purify me. I knew that, and I accepted it. It's like, have you considered my servant Job? Christians don't really want to say, hey, have you considered my servant Joseph? Then it's like admitting, oh crap, here it's going to come.
Yeah.
I knew this was happening so that God could purify me. I personally think, yeah, I'm on school board. There's something else he's going to do with my life, and I don't know what it is, but it's above and beyond what I'm doing now.
Wow. Well, the important part here is that you're walking by faith and not by sight. That's the important part. Things, even though sometimes things they don't make sense.
Yeah.
You're real big in philosophy and logic.
Yeah.
Sometimes it just comes back to Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5 and 6. Lean not on your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path straight.
Yeah.
He'll make your path straight. And that's what the Lord is doing with you. And that's what I sense. And even though you're being squeezed and you're being attacked in all different ways, you're being led by the Lord.
Yeah.
You're being sustained. You're being provided for. People love you. Where people are praying for you. You're just caught in the middle of a war.
Yeah.
And that's really the life of a Christian. We're just walking through, and God is just winning these battles. we just have to keep taking that next step.
Yeah.
And
well, let me give it an
Sure.
analogy to that. Part of it is going back to the bully pastor thing that you were talking about earlier. Some pastors don't want to talk about politics or social issues at all, and some, do. My thought to the pastors is like, if you don't want to talk about politics at all, and I'm gonna end with this verse, then you certainly don't want to mention Genesis 41:38. Joseph is made governor over all of Egypt. Apply that to my life. I'm not worthy like Joseph. I'm not trying to compare myself. Oh, I'm going to be governor. Not like that at all. Joseph had no political aspirations at all. He was literally working in the yard for somebody, and then his wife tries to sleep with him. He's like, no. And then, he's caught in the middle. He gets sent to prison. God was forming Joseph's character in that prison for years. And then he comes out and he's like, now you're governor. Joseph didn't see that coming, but here's what God was doing. He was forming his character so that when Joseph had power, he wouldn't be corrupted by it. He would do the right thing. He would help all the lands around him. But there's a moment of vulnerability in there. People might overlook this. Remember the cupbearer and then the guy who holds the bread or whatever, and they're trying to like get Joseph's favor in prison. And Joseph's like, hey, when you get released, please remember me. One of the things I thought about going through my attacks is like, well, wait a minute. Why would you say that, Joseph? If you had full faith and confidence in God, why would you say, remember me? Because he was weak. He was being attacked. He was like, what am I doing in prison, God? That's my thought on Joseph. But God was doing it to let him know, yeah, you're vulnerable. You got to lean on me. And then he gets out, and then his life changed dramatically forever. But had God not formed his character, Joseph wouldn't have been able to be governor of Egypt, to handle that power. It would have corrupted him.
Super good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would have corrupted him.
And God would have I would have been corrupted as board president, not having my character molded for that moment. I didn't take it personal. I don't want the limelight. I don't want to you're like, hey, bro, you're going to run for Congress and that? Yeah, I want to go all up these higher echelons of political. No, I tell them I take it day by day, whatever the Lord wants from me. But I knew this. He put me in this position of power. I'm not going to use it, in a bad way. It'll be to glorify God and his kingdom and protect his children.
Super good. If you could share one message to parents, students, and teachers, what would it be?
Well, when you hear this podcast, you think Joseph's a holy rolling Christian. Yeah, absolutely. But your kids in our school district, whether they're Christian or not, I'm going to protect them. I have conservative values. And what that means is I want your kids to get a good quality education or a community. And whether I'm a Christian or not won't matter when you see I'm just creating policies to protect your kids. I'm not trying to push Christianity in the school districts. I've been accused of doing that. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So I would say that to the Christian, if forget political calling, just a calling in general in your life, fast and pray and know. You could sit back and say, how do you know you were called to the seminary? Say, because I know, because I asked God, what do you want me to do? And I prayed and fasted. That's to the Christian. To the non-Christian and the Christian alike, if you have any questions, just reach out to me. Even though our faiths might not align, I'll bet you we have way more in common than we do in disagreement form. I mean, I've got best friends that are atheists and that aren't even agnostics, and we're like bros for life. I pray for them all the time. So I just want people to know, I'm not in this super bubble of, Christianity, even though me and as brothers in Christ, light has no fellowship with darkness. I still have friends that I deeply love that aren't even Christian. Mm-hmm. So there's no chasm, us versus you type thing. You're made in the image of God. I love you and I'll pray for you. You got disagreements? Call me up. Let's have a conversation.
So good.
Yeah.
All right.
Praise God. Thanks for the time, Anthony.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming out.
Pastor Anthony. I go to your church.
Yeah. Thank you for coming out, my friend.
Yeah.
And God bless you, bro. Hey, thank you so much for watching this clip. I'm super encouraged by you listening, but make sure you hit that subscribe button, like the video, comment below, hit that notification bell, share the video, spread this message to support the channel. And remember, from the devil's side to the Lord's side.